Back. So we are going to try and get the actual data from, so notice right now we're logged in, right? That makes sense. And we're logged in using this authenticated user right here. Also, I've explained this a few times. I'm going to use this UID now when I'm logged in to kind of, when I'm getting the user, I want to not only get the user, the authenticated user that I just showed you, I also want to get this user in the same request. So the idea is pretty much that when I open up my profile, I'll populate these fields with the actual information from the Firestore database on Firebase by looking up a specific user in that database. That's what we're going to do. Now this is rather complex stuff because we're going to do some observable work right here. We're going to start using the observable a lot more than what we've done until now. So let's just try and right here explain what we want to do. Now step one is we want to kind of get the auth user, right? And that's what we're doing right here. The authenticated user, that's the one we're already showing right now because we're just getting an email right now from the auth user, the authenticated user, and we're getting the unique identifier. So that's kind of step one right here, and we already have that right here to get the authenticated user. But remember, it's an async call, so we don't know when he's going to be returned. So we have to kind of do some magic to say we don't want to execute anything until we get the authenticated user back. Sweet. When we got the authenticated user, we're going to make a second request or a second request against Firebase at least, where we're going to ask for more information. And here we're going to get the database user, right? So that's where we're going to get the DB user. So that's the second thing we want to do. Now the third thing I want to do is then merge these two together. So merge both, right? So I want to kind of say I have the auth user and I have some extra information on the DB user. Let's merge these guys together and then return them as one object. That's the goal. And we're going to use some different things here because since this is an asynchronous method, so we don't know when we're getting this back, and this is an asynchronous method, we don't know when this is getting back, to kind of combine these two and wait for each other, we're going to use something called the switch map. That's going to be the first thing we need to kind of work with, a switch map. Now this is kind of a way for us to say when I'm waiting for this guy, I can explain to the system that you do not want to return anything from this function until both of these guys have actually returned information. Then we want to kind of return something, right? That's the magic of the switch map. Now to merge them, we're going to use something else called the map. And that pretty much just means that when I'm done getting all of this information back, then I can say before you return all of this information that I've just waited for, then I want to map it, I want to change it, I want to convert it into something else, and then you can return it all as an observable. So both of these methods are going to return observables for me. This guy is going to wait until these guys are done and then it'll return an observable. And this guy is going to say, okay, when we're done actually getting the data, we're going to convert it a bit and then return another observable. I know it's kind of complex, but let's just try and do it and maybe it will make more sense. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start out by just using this function right here. So let's just start out by returning that function. Now this function is of course just getting an observable from our auth service up here. Let's just have a look at it. So get auth user right here is just going to return the Firebase auth state user right here, and it's going to convert him by using the map into an actual user. We already tried that, so let's just keep that as it is. So let's try and jump into the service right here. So as I said, the first thing I want to do is kind of use a switch map to say that when this is done, I want to do one more thing before I actually return an observable to whoever wants to use my system. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that at some point we're going to get an auth user back from the first request right here, and I want to use that auth user for something, right? I want to use the auth user because I want to get his unique identifier. That's what I want to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to say I want to return the actual database user right here, and I'm going to get him from Firebase. So I'll say this AFS for kind of getting a connection to the Firestore, right? I want to get a specific document that I'm looking for, just like we're doing down here. The document I'm looking for is inside the users collection, and I'm going to find it by actually using the auth users, right? The auth users unique identifier. That's how I'm going to find this user right here. Now when I'm doing this, I need to somehow explain to the system that I'm going to now go and grab that user from the backend, and you do that by calling. There's a few ways to do it, but I'm going to use the values changed right here. That pretty much means that now I have an observable that listens, that I can use now for saying, okay, let's start listening, let's start grabbing data from this specific user collection and listen for when this user is actually loaded for me. Okay, So now that we have that available, what we can do is actually we can say, I want to now, when this is loaded, when this user is now available, I want to kind of return him, right? So now we've set up the switch map, which will kind of return a document right now. But notice if I mouse over right here, it says you cannot convert an observable with arrays into an observable of the type user. So there's something wrong right now because this guy might return multiple users to me. So we have to do something more. And what we'll do is now we'll add the map. That was the second part. We need to now take this user and merge them together with this user and then return that as a single function. So we know that the value change is going to return some kind of DB user, right? And we want to use that DB user for something. So now we have the second thing, now we have the map. And all we need to do is now merge these two together, right? That's the last step. Now to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the DB user I'm getting from the database, let's add a unique identifier on this guy. Now notice it doesn't know that this is a user right now. That's a problem. I want it to know that this DB user is a user. So what you'll do is right here after the doc, you'll just add a conversion and explain that what I'm getting back from the document is going to be of the type user, right? That's pretty powerful. So now this guy knows he's a DB user and he knows now he has all these beautiful properties. So I'm going to explain that I want the UID to be set to the auth user's UID, right? And then I want the user's email to be set, because that's not anywhere inside my database, that's actually from the authenticated user. So I want that to be set to the authenticated user's email. And when both these properties are set, I just want to return the DB user, because that's kind of the merged user object. And then everything shines again. Everything is working. So now what I'm doing, and I know this is complex, read it a few times, try to understand it. I think I'm going to stop the video right now and then we'll explain in the next video and just do a few changes to it. So just have a look at the code, try to understand it, and next lesson we'll try and just make a few changes because it's not quite perfect yet, and then we'll dive more into some of the code. See you next time, have fun.